trauma, the unopened Pandora's box. Traumatized people feel that the past lives on inside their bodies, as the instinctive alarm signals continue to be turned on. Life is like an adventure, but many actions are disrupted by experiences that end up turning into trauma, or multiple traumas. They just happen as life goes on. No one prepares you for a possible trauma, do they? Often, regret or guilt brings more grief to people who have a trauma than the actual traumatic experience. Many people relive their trauma every day, leaving them scared, angry, confused, and out of control. They are sure that they could have done more, paid more attention, and that perhaps they could have chosen a different way home. These people feel bad for not having foreseen what was going to happen. They also judge themselves harshly and think about how different everything could have been. However, they all end up stuck on the same thought: what really happened? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it destiny. Carl Jung. The truth about trauma. Trauma is a thing of the past, but the scars they leave are deep and sometimes permanent, and they control people's thoughts and behavior. With the help of the Rorschach test, it was discovered, for example, that traumatized people force their trauma down over everything else in life. In other words, and in addition to what we have already mentioned, a trauma can also affect the imagination, which is necessary when considering different possibilities. One example is that it has been found that many war soldiers only felt alive when they remembered their traumatic past. Mind, brain, body. It is important to help traumatized patients tell their story. However, inciting and forcing them to do so does not make their traumatic memories go away. In order to bring about change, their body must learn to live in reality without fear of what has happened in the past. Many studies have shown that people who were ignored as children often experience emotions without a physical cause. Examples are hearing frightening voices or displaying self-destructive or violent behavior. The untreated pieces of the trauma are hidden outside the story. When traumatized people are shown stimuli related to their traumatic experiences, the amygdala, the fear center, reacts and activates a kind of alarm signal. This activates a series of nerve impulses that prepare the body to flee or fight. Denial of trauma. Some people deny their traumatic experiences. However, their bodies still remember everything, including the threats. In this way, we learn to ignore the messages the emotional part of the brain sends us, but the body's alarm system does not stop. Denial of a trauma causes its physical effects to express themselves as a demanding illness, such as fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue. Medicines can soothe the unbearable feelings and unpleasant thoughts. It is important to notice how important it is to treat trauma, both mentally and physically. Unexpressed feelings never die. They are buried alive and will come back worse. Sigmund Freud. A tragic adaptation. Several studies have tried to answer the same question: what happens in the brain of a person who survives a trauma? Dr. Lanius asked, what does our brain do when we are not thinking about anything specific? It turns out that we focus on ourselves and reach a point of self-awareness. According to some researchers, there was no activity in the areas of the brain that contain self-concept in PTSD patients with childhood trauma. However, they showed low activity in the area responsible for basic spatial orientation. Freud and Ruth Lanius discovered that the more distant people are from their emotions, the less self-perceptive activity they show. In other words, this shows that people learn in response to their trauma to turn off the areas of the brain that emit emotions associated with fear. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. The threat of the ego. The ego's fundamental system is distributed between the brainstem and the limbic system, which is activated when the person feels threatened. An intense physiological activation follows the feeling of fear and terror. When people relive their traumas, they get the same paralyzing and uncomfortable feeling. After the trauma, the body and mind are constantly activated, as if they were facing the same danger again. Traumatized people feel that the past lives on inside their bodies, as the instinctive alarm signals continue to be turned on. Many of them feel chronically insecure and see disconnection as the easiest way to deal with the emotional changes. They often have panic attacks and need to regulate their environment, whether with drugs, medication or compulsions. Their inability to understand their bodies explains the absence of self-protection, the difficulties in feeling joy and meaning in life, and the recurring trauma experiences.